Hi y'all. This is the third segment in the Accessing Earth Engine Data in Web Applications series. In the first section, we did the basic environment setup and package installs. In the second segment, we built out a test route which returned a tile URL for a predefined Earth Engine image and displayed it on a map. In this segment, we will build a dynamic UI framework to request datasets from Earth Engine. We will add a new route called meanImageByCollection, which will enable us to request any Earth Engine image collection, filter by date, and apply vision parameters. To avoid having to type out all of the new lines of code, I have created a branch in the GitHub repo where you can copy and paste from, or simply clone and check out the branch step_3_dynamic_image collection. The link to the repo is in the description below. We're going to tune up the application a bit to make it a little more lifelike and dynamic. I have cloned the repo and checked out the branch step3 dynamic image collection. Let's first look at what we will be building in this video. Notice instead of a full screen map, we have a header bar, which is where one would put a menu, a side panel to control which route the user wants to request, and there is a blank section under the map which is reserved for graphing that will be covered in the next video. Along with that, there's a dynamic form that the user will fill out for the selected route. Let's start looking at the code that has been added. We'll start with the server-side code. In app.py, we have added the route meanImageByCollection. This is set up as a post route, which means that it expects JSON data to be sent with the request, which it will use to generate the tile URL. If the request does not have any JSON data, it will raise the exception and pass back the error message invalid request type. Please use JSON to the client. If it does, the only parameter that is required is the collection name. So we grab that from the request. If it contains data, we continue on and we fill the method call with the collection name and the values from the request, visparams, datefrom, and date2. And pass that into the method call. And let's look at the method in eeutils.py. The method is fairly simple. It takes the collection name. If there's no visparams, it will just send an empty JSON object. If there's no datefrom, it will replace that with none, and same thing with date2. It checks to see if there is a date range. If there is a date range, it's going to get the image collection from the collection name, and then it's going to filter it by the date from and the date2 and set that to EE_collection. If it does not have a date range, it will just grab the entire image collection. Once it has set EE_collection, it will take the mean of the EE_collection, pass in the visparams to image to map ID, which we created last time, and we will return that back to app.py into values. And then values will be wrapped inside of JSONify and sent back to the client. Now let's look at the client-side code. As you can imagine, this is where a lot has been added. If you recall, there wasn't much to the index.html prior to now. We have added Bootstrap, so there's a link to the CSS, to the JavaScript, and to Popper, which is required by Bootstrap. Also, we have added feather icons, which we use for some additional fanciness. Along with that, we have added a new file named uiutils.js, which we also link to. Down to the body of the structure. Before now, it only had the map div. Now it contains all of the new structure. At the top here, you can see the nav, which contains basically just an application name link, kind of a home button if there are more pages and links, and then a link to an external site which is set to the right. Next, we have a fluid container with a row inside it. This encapsulates the bulk of our application. Inside that, you see sidebar sticky, which is where we define our dashboard items, or the links that the user will click to access and fill out the form to submit to our API. Here you can see mapping requests. This is one of the categories. Inside you can see the test route. You can see the meanImageByCollection route. You can see the next category, the graphing request. And you can see the coming soon route. Notice that the categories have a toggle category call to a JavaScript function. We'll look at that. And then each of the routes have load parameter panel, and they pass in the name of the function that needs to be called. We will look at those as we get further into the JavaScript files up here. Below all that, we close the nav tag. We have the main section, which has the map div and the graph container. And then below that we have the overlay, which will be used as a page cover when we want to get the data from the server. And finally we have a script tag which enables the feather replace, which actually loads the icons for us. Let's take a quick look at the CSS updates. I won't go into a lot of detail about all the CSS, but if you have any questions about what is happening, please leave a question in the comment section below. Basically, you can see that the map, we've cut the height down to 50%. We've added CSS for the overlay. We've added CSS for the sidebar. Added CSS for the main content, the nav bar, the form that we're going to be using, and then we've also added some CSS for responsive design. Our next stop is map_utils.js, where we have just added one line to hide the overlay after we add the layer to the map. We do this whether it's successful or whether it fails. In a full production application, we would need to give the user better indications of what went wrong if there was an error. Currently, we're just logging it to the console. The other thing we've added here is the remove layer, which does exactly what the name suggests. It removes the layer from the map. Now let's move to EarthEngineDemo.js, where we have made a couple of small adjustments, but also added two functions. In the ready function, we have removed the call to the test function, as we no longer want to add this to the map on page load. We have replaced it with the init request modal, which we will look at in the next file. Moving down to meanImageByCollection, it is building a JSON object with parameters for the server by accessing values in the form. Because we build the form dynamically with reusable elements, it is easy to identify which element holds which value. Once it fills the JSON object, it calls the route from the server, meanImageByCollection. When it gets the data back, it simply adds the data to the map layer. This looks similar to the test route. It calls the server with the data, it gets a result, and adds to the map. This is a perfect example of where we could remove that part of the code and make a separate function, so it's not typed over and over again in the code. We may do that in a later video, but for now it's fine. The final function here is just the coming soon, which only logs that it was there, hides the overlay, and moves on. As mentioned, graphing will be in the next video. Finally, we can move to the UIUtils.js. There is a lot here. It controls the UI as well as the dynamic building of our request form. The first function, initRequestModal, which was called from EarthEngineDemo.js ready function, creates a blank hidden modal and attaches it to the body of our document. The next two are helper functions. The first to get access to the modal, and the second to set its content with our dynamic HTML. Next, we have the toggle sidebar. This is only accessible when the browser width is less than 768 pixels. Then the UI is in mobile mode. When that is the case, the sidebar is automatically hidden and a gear icon is displayed to access the side panel. I will show this when we run the application. Toggle category opens and closes our category sections. Currently we have mapping request and graphing requests. Now comes the dynamic part where we create the form. Remember, when a user clicks any of the routes, it calls load parameter panel and sends which parameter it wants. The first thing we do here is remove the layer if it exists, and then all of the routes have the same begin modal UI. They just have to parse out the route and put that in the title bar here. So this is the HTML for the begin modal UI. It's basically just a header and beginning of the body. Then we go through the switch statement. Again, we're still passing through the which, and if the route that was passed was test, we go and we get the test UI. So let's look at that. The test UI, the only thing in the test UI is this form group and then a label which says, there's nothing to do, just hit submit. And returns that HTML, and we append that to this HTML. And at that point we would break and go all the way down to here, but we'll look at these other cases first. So this is a case where you could have passed image. We don't have this set up yet, but I'm using this to show you that we're able to reuse these elements. So image, we get the get image name UI, which is down here. It is a form group, it has a label and an input, and then it just returns that HTML. It also has it appends a break tag and then a get vision parameters UI. So let's look at that. That's down here. So this is pretty similar. It's basically the only difference is instead of an input, it has a text area. And of course, the placeholder is going to be different as well. So it returns that, and again, it would break and go down to the close modal. So now let's look at the meanImageByCollection. So this gets the image name UI, which is exactly the same as this one did. Then it gets the from date and to date UI. So let's look at those real quick. So these are pretty close to the same. The only difference is the IDs. Again, this is a case where those could more than likely be consolidated into one, and we could just pass the ID to that. And then the last thing it gets is the vision params UI, which is exactly the same thing that it got there. And it builds that into this HTML. And again, that would go down to this get close modal UI. But let's look at the coming soon. Again, this is a different route, and coming soon. Well, since we didn't build that yet, all it does is say, basically we haven't built this yet. So, whichever route we've collected in this switch statement, it's going to come down here and it's going to go to the get close modal UI, which is here. And the close modal UI, It's the same for all of them with the exception of it needs that route to call the function. All of the routes have their own functions. Yeah, so it just closes the footer and puts the two buttons, either the cancel or the submit button. And then it's ready to go. So here we have the entire HTML, and then this is the helper function that we saw earlier, that we're going to set the HTML, and then we're going to go ahead and show the modal. At that point, we just wait for the user to either click cancel or submit. Okay, that was a lot of new stuff. Let's take a look at what we've accomplished. Here's the app again. And I had mentioned before about the side panel, so let's take a quick look at that. So you can see the side panel adjusts and then it disappears. So this is a mobile mode. This is more for like tablet size, but it can go all the way down to a phone size. So here you would have to click this button to access your routes or to close it. But if you access your route, it will bring up your test route. This is our test route. We'll hit submit. It closes that for us and then goes and gets the image and puts it on the map just like we would expect. However, if this was open, it would do exactly the same thing. You hit the test route, nothing needed, just hit submit. Again, it goes and gets the image and puts it on the map. And you notice that it takes it off the map now when we click. So we click coming soon, it takes it off the map. There's nothing to do here. We just simply submit or close, nothing's going to happen. Doesn't make any difference. And then let's try our new route, the meanImageByCollection. We'll use the chirps daily, and let's try 01/01 to 2018, and let's just do 01/31 2018. And I've got some vision parameters here to use, and you can take a look at those. It's just the max 17, min 1, band is precipitation, that's the only band in chirps daily, and then I have given it a palette with these different colors in it. So we're going to go ahead and submit. And one thing to keep in mind with the vision parameters is it's an excellent idea to quote everything, whether it's a number, whether it's a boolean, whether it's a string. Just make sure you quote all of them. So you can see that it brought back the image tiles, and it's putting them on, and we can zoom out, and it's adding new tiles, and it's using our color scheme. So, right, is it using our color scheme? Well, let's find out. Let's do the exact same thing. 01/01 2018, then 01/31 2018. Well, let's use a different color scheme. So the same min and max, same band, just a different palette. So you can see this is completely different. This is the same image. It's just using different vision parameters. And that's what is very impressive about this, is whatever the user wants to identify, they can use their vision parameters to do that. So that's all I have for this segment of accessing Earth Engine data in web applications. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thanks, everyone.